Champagne hit my face before I even saw the glass leave her hand. Not the cold. Not the taste. The sound. That sharp, humiliating splash, followed by laughter. Loud. Cruel. Confident. I stood frozen as bubbles slid down my cheeks and soaked into my sweater, my ears ringing while her voice cut through the room like a blade. Get this trash out of my house. People gasped. Then they leaned in. Phones came out. Smiles spread. Someone laughed a little too hard. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the pen, but I signed the divorce papers anyway. The ink bled where my signature trembled. Fitting, really. Nothing about that night was clean. He stood a few steps away from me, arm wrapped protectively around another woman's waist. She was beautiful in that effortless way money teaches you to be. Calm. Untouchable. Smiling like this was all part of the evening's entertainment. And me? I was the joke. The cautionary tale. The orphan who forgot her place. What none of them knew. Not him, not his venomous mother, not his smug father or his social media-obsessed sister, was that a few hours earlier, my phone had rung inside a greasy diner booth. That call had already sealed their fate, but they didn't know that yet. All they saw was me standing there, drenched in humiliation, holding papers that said I was leaving with nothing. They thought they'd won. Earlier that evening, the house looked like something torn straight out of a winter fantasy. Snow fell thick and perfect, coating sculpted hedges and iron gates in white. Light spilled from the windows, warm and golden, promising comfort it never delivered to me. Inside, a tree towered toward the ceiling, drowning in gold ornaments and crystal lights. I stood at the service entrance, tugging my worn coat tighter around myself, watching guests arrive like royalty. Fur collars. Tailored suits. Laughter that floated easily because rent and hunger were abstract ideas to these people. I had been married into this family for years. Years of scraping by while pretending I belonged. Years of working until my hands ached while they reminded me, subtly and not so subtly, that I was temporary. I hadn't grown up like them. I grew up in institutions that smelled like bleach and resignation. Rows of narrow beds. No photos on the walls. No versas. No one waiting for me anywhere. When he first noticed me behind the counter of a cafe, I thought fate had finally blinked in my direction. He was charming. Polished. From a world I'd only ever seen through glass. He said none of that mattered. I believed him. That was my first mistake. His mother opened the door herself, dressed in velvet so rich it practically breathed superiority. Diamonds caught the chandelier light as she looked me up and down like I was a stain she'd failed to scrub out. "You're late," she said flatly. "The guests need drinks. Try not to embarrass us." No greeting. No holiday warmth. Just instructions. I swallowed everything I wanted to say and stepped inside. That house never felt like home. It felt like a museum where I wasn't allowed to touch anything, including my own dignity. The party was already roaring. Conversations about investments and ski trips bounced through the room. Perfume hung heavy in the air. I moved through it all with a tray balanced on my palms, invisible unless someone needed a refill. That's when I saw him. Perfect posture. Perfect smile. Perfect suit. And beside him, her. She fit into his world the way I never could. Graceful. Confident. Her hand rested on his arm like it had always belonged there. I felt something twist painfully in my chest, but I kept walking. I was good at pretending not to see things. That skill had kept me alive. It wouldn't save me tonight. I didn't hear his announcement coming. One moment I was navigating between guests. The next his voice cut through the room, smooth and rehearsed. He thanked everyone for coming. Then he said my name. Every I turned. I knew. Before he finished the sentence, I knew. He talked about mistakes. About growth. About moving forward. About correcting the past. When he pulled the papers from his jacket, the room seemed to tilt. "This ends tonight," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "So there's no confusion." His mother smiled. His father nodded. His sister lifted her phone higher. The papers were shoved into my hands like garbage. "You came from nothing," his father said. "You'll leave the same way." Someone laughed. I walked forward because my legs knew what to do even when my mind didn't. I tried to read the pages, but the words blurred together. Empty promises and emptier protections. That's when the champagne came flying. Cold. Sticky. Public. The glass shattered at my feet. That's for wasting my son's life, his mother snapped. You should be grateful we tolerated you at all. I signed. Because I was tired. Because I was alone. Because I didn't know yet that everything was already changing. Security grabbed my arms and dragged me toward the doors like I was dangerous. Like I was disposable. Snow swallowed me whole as the gates slammed shut behind my back. And just like that, I was out. 3 miles later, I sat in a diner booth that smelled like burnt coffee and regret, my sweater still damp, my phone blinking its final warning. I had nowhere to go. I was breaking. That's when my phone rang. Restricted number. I almost ignored it. Almost. The phone buzzed again in my trembling hand. Restricted number. I stared at the screen like it might bite me. Every instinct screamed scam. People didn't call girls like me with good news. They called to take what little we had left. I answered anyway. Is this Miss Rowan? A woman asked. Her voice was calm. Precise. The kind of voice that didn't waste words. You have the wrong person, I said, my throat tight. You want someone else. Your legal name is Magnolia Grace Rowan, she replied smoothly. But you were born Magnolia Grace Holloway. My breath caught so sharply it hurt. No one knew that name. No one was supposed to. I think you've made a mistake, I whispered, already shaking. I haven't, she said. I'm calling regarding your biological father. I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was absurd. Cruel even. A joke aimed straight at the softest part of me. I don't have a father, I said. I never did. You do, she replied. And he's been looking for you for over 2 decades. I hung up. My hands were slick with sweat as the phone vibrated again. Once. Twice. 3 times. When I finally answered, my voice cracked. Stop calling me. I'm outside, she said gently. Please just look out the window. I turned. A dark sedan sat alone beneath the diner's buzzing fluorescent light. 2 people stepped out. A sharp-dressed woman in a long coat, and an older man with a weathered face and careful movements. They walked in like they belonged there. Like this was planned. They slid into the booth across from me as if my life hadn't just imploded hours earlier. I'm Evelyn Hart, the woman said. I'm an attorney. This is Samuel Price, a private investigator. The man pushed a thick folder toward me. Open it. Inside were documents layered with too much detail to fake. Birth records. DNA matches. Hospital reports. Photos. One photo made my chest seize. A woman with my eyes. My mouth. My face. She was holding a newborn. That's your mother, Evelyn said quietly. She died the night you were born. The world went muffled. Samuel leaned forward. Your father is Nathaniel Holloway, founder of Holloway Holdings. Hospitality, technology, property, media. He paused. An empire. I couldn't breathe. I wanted to scream that this wasn't real, that I'd already had enough fantasy for one night. Why now? I asked hoarsely. Because he's dying, Evelyn said. And because the woman who stole you left a confession before she passed. Everything inside me cracked open at once. I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I laughed again, wild and hollow. Because hours earlier I'd been dragged into the snow like garbage. And now these strangers were telling me I belonged to a world that could buy that mansion and burn it down for warmth. Prove it, I said. They did. An hour later, I was in the back of that car, driving toward a place that made my former in-laws' estate look like a hobby project. He was waiting for me. Smaller than I expected. Frail. Tubes and machines humming softly around him. But when he looked up, those eyes. My eyes. Tears slid down his face before he even spoke. Maggie, he whispered. You look just like her. I collapsed beside him. He held my hands like he'd been holding the memory of them his whole life. I failed you once, he said through tears. I won't fail you again. That night, I learned about my mother. About love. About loss. And about the man who had stolen everything from us. Nathaniel's brother. The one running the company in his absence. The one who thought there was no heir. Evelyn's voice dropped as she spoke. If you reveal yourself too soon, she said, you could be in danger. I didn't hesitate. Then I stay hidden, I said. I learn everything. She nodded. Good. Because when we move, we don't miss. I looked down at my hands. The same hands that had signed divorce papers hours earlier. Only now they were holding power. And I knew exactly where I wanted to use it first. I disappeared. Not dramatically. No headlines. No goodbyes. I simply stopped being the girl they'd thrown into the snow. For weeks, my name existed only on sealed documents and whispered phone calls. I stayed inside a quiet estate far from the city. A place designed for privacy, not luxury, where every mirror reminded me how little of myself I truly knew. They rebuilt me from the inside out. Private instructors arrived daily. Finance, corporate law, strategy, negotiation. I learned how power actually moved. Not loudly, not emotionally, but patiently, like water wearing down stone. I learned how to listen without reacting. How to ask questions that sounded harmless. How to smile while planning 10 moves ahead. Evelyn watched everything. Your anger will give you energy, she told me once. But discipline will win the war. I held on to that. At night, when sleep wouldn't come, I replayed the party in my head. The laughter, the phones raised, the cold splash on my skin. I didn't cry anymore. I sharpened. The investigators' reports arrived thick and ugly. The man who'd discarded me? Drowning. His company was a mirage held together by debt and ego. He'd rushed into a new marriage for appearances, not love. And his new bride came with secrets so volatile they could level him. His father's business? Under quiet investigation. Fraud buried beneath polished press releases. His mother? Addicted to risk in ways that didn't involve money alone. Desperation disguised as entitlement. And the sister? She'd built her confidence on tearing others down. Now someone had a knife at her throat, and she was paying to keep it there. Then came the part that made my hands shake again. He had emptied my savings. Every emergency fund. Every hidden envelope. Gone. Worse, he'd forged my signature. Debt I didn't recognize. Obligations I'd never agreed to. He'd planned it. Marry the orphan. Use her. Break her. Leave her holding the bill. Something inside me went very still. I didn't rage. I planned. My new name arrived with a passport. Elena Virelli. Foreign. Polished. Impossible to trace. I changed my hair. My posture. My voice. I learned how to walk into a room like I was doing them a favor by being there. When I looked in the mirror, even I barely recognized myself. Good. My first move was simple. I offered money. A generous investment proposal slid across a boardroom table like bait. The kind of number that made greedy men forget caution. They invited me in. They smiled. They never once saw me. The first meeting felt surreal. Sitting across from people who had watched me be destroyed, now hanging on to my every word. He stared at me longer than the others. Frowning. Searching. Something about me felt familiar. It drove him crazy. I smiled sweetly and took notes. That night, they insisted on a celebration dinner. At the same house. I almost laughed. I walked through those doors again wearing silk instead of shame. Their eyes followed me. Admiring. Curious. Hungry. His mother complimented my dress. I thanked her. Inside, my pulse was thunder. Over wine and candlelight, they mocked the girl I used to be. Casually, cruelly, like she was a funny anecdote from a bad year. I recorded everything. When his wife touched her stomach, glowing and proud, I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. Because I already knew the truth. And soon. So would he. That dinner was supposed to celebrate my investment. Instead, it became a slow, elegant autopsy. Candles flickered against polished silver. Soft music played. Laughter rose and fell like nothing in this room had ever gone wrong. They treated me like royalty. Leaning in when I spoke, agreeing too quickly, watching my reactions with anxious smiles. Power is funny like that. Give people money and they'll rewrite history for you. His mother sat across from me, sipping wine, talking about loyalty and family values like she hadn't thrown a drink in my face months earlier. At the end of the day, she said sweetly, blood matters. I nearly choked on my water. Someone asked about his previous marriage. Oh, that, she laughed. A charity case. We fixed that mistake. He smiled along with her. That was the moment something inside me hardened permanently. After dessert, his uncle pulled me aside. He was sharper than the others. Dangerous in a quiet way. His eyes didn't miss details, they calculated them. Something about you doesn't add up, he said. I met his gaze calmly. You should trust your instincts. His mouth twitched. Not amused. Before he could press further, my phone vibrated. Evelyn. 3 words flashed on the screen. He's crashing. Now. My father. The hospital smelled like antiseptic and inevitability. Machines hummed. Nurses moved softly, like the world itself was afraid to wake him. He took my hand with what little strength he had left. Finish this, he whispered. Take back what's yours. His breathing slowed. I felt something cold and resolute settle in my chest. No more waiting. I made one call. Emergency shareholders meeting. Media invited. Authorities notified. Everyone who thought they were untouchable summoned. They arrived confident. Smiling. Wrong. The room filled with voices and cameras. I walked in last. Different again. Sharper. Still. I stepped to the podium. My name, I said clearly, is not Elena Varelli. Gasps rippled. I removed my glasses. Recognition slammed into his face like a car crash. I am Magnolia Grace Holloway, I continued. Daughter of Nathaniel Holloway. Soleil. Chaos exploded. Shouting. Flashing lights. Hands grabbing phones. I didn't stop. Evidence filled the screens behind me. Theft, fraud, forged signatures. Agents moved in. The uncle ran. He didn't make it far. His father followed, pale, shaking, furious. His mother screamed like the world owed her mercy. I turned to him last. You took everything I had, I said calmly. Now you get to feel that. His world collapsed in real time. The room emptied slowly after that. Not because anyone wanted to leave, but because there was nothing left to say. They were crying, arguing, blaming each other, grabbing at lawyers and phones that no longer rang with solutions. I walked out without looking back. For the first time in my life, I didn't need to run. My father passed quietly a few days later. I was there, holding his hand, listening to the steady rhythm of machines slow until they didn't need to try anymore. Your mother would be proud, he whispered. I believed him. The fallout was surgical. Companies collapsed where rot had been hiding behind polish. Accounts froze. Properties changed hands. Names that once commanded rooms became liabilities overnight. His father was charged and sentenced. His mother lost everything: the house, the lifestyle, the illusion of superiority. She moved into a place she would have mocked once, learning the difference between luxury and survival. He took a job that didn't care who his family was. Debt followed him like a shadow. The woman who had smiled beside him that night vanished when the truth surfaced. The baby's real father disappeared even faster. And the sister? Silence. No posts. No lives. No audience. As for me, I rebuilt. Not with vengeance, with intention. I cleaned house. Replaced fear with transparency. Greed with accountability. I funded scholarships for kids who grew up like I did. Invisible, underestimated, hungry for more than food. I built housing meant to shelter dignity, not just bodies. I learned that power doesn't need to humiliate to be absolute. That winter, I visited 2 graves. Snow fell quietly, the same way it had on the night they threw me out. I placed flowers. I spoke softly. I was never what they said I was. I told them. I was always yours. I walked away lighter than I'd ever been. They didn't break me. They freed me. Every insult, every lie, every moment meant to shrink me had shaped something unmovable instead. I don't chase revenge stories anymore. I write endings. And this was just the first chapter. Please click the subscribe button, like, share, and comment. This will encourage me to make more interesting stories. Also, let's know where you are watching from. Thank you and see you in the next story.